Hi everyone, welcome to Medicine for the Soul. I'm Sarah, and congratulations. If you're watching this video, it probably means you've just given birth recently, which is not easy and a huge accomplishment. So good job for being here. Getting back onto your mat and kind of just seeing how your body moves now that there's not a human inside of it is definitely a journey. The first step we want to take is making sure we've checked with our doctor that we are good to go for exercise, and specifically for yoga exercise. That looks different for everyone. Most often you hear the number 6 weeks. With my daughter, my first birth, it was a lot longer. And with my son, who was my second birth, I could get back on my mat in 2 weeks. So definitely check and make sure before getting into any consistent yoga practice. What this video is gonna kind of go over are like the typical asanas that we practice in yoga class, what that might look like for you now in postpartum, and then certain things to avoid and some alternatives to those things that we should stay away from. In a warm-up setting, you're gonna typically be pretty good to go. The things that we wanna kind of avoid are gonna be similar to prenatal modifications. So if we're coming into a seated twist, instead of being in a closed twist, we wanna be in an open twist. So a closed twist would look like this. An open twist is going to look like this, where our body is twisting into open space instead of towards the other side of our body. Another example is if we have our leg out in front of us and our opposite knee in front of us, normally we would be twisting away in the opposite direction. So in postpartum, we're going to want to be twisting up towards open space, and you can still get that nice rotation in your upper back, which is nice, especially if you're breastfeeding, to get that movement up there. So just a nice open twist, and you can just see what that feels like instead of coming into a closed twist. And the reason we want to avoid deep closed twists are, especially if you have any abdominal separation. Again, you can check with your doctor about this. If you don't have any injury, then maybe that's okay with you and your body to do. And the next, moving forward into kind of a typical yoga class, we would be doing maybe child's pose, which is great to do, cat-cow, which is amazing to do and perfectly safe. And then getting into down dog. Down dog is a great inversion, and it's really everything. It's a great pose in general. So coming from down dog into a forward fold and kind of getting into maybe a sun salutation, we can start to look at modifications for that. So we're at the top of the mat. And if we're coming into some sun salutations, we might want to modify a little bit. So we're coming back into a forward fold. And typically, we would place our hands on the mat to get into a plank position and then come into up dog or cobra. So what you can do instead is bring your knees down to the mat. You can come into kind of a rocking cat pose, which is pushing the mat away from you, tucking your tailbone, gazing back towards your belly button, and bringing your seat back to your heels, and then coming back up and meeting everyone in down dog. And this is, again, to avoid the deep stretching of our abdominal muscles. And then also if you are breastfeeding and have very full or tender breasts, maybe your milk is oversupplying and you don't want to put any pressure on them, that's a good way you can avoid that. So we can go through that again. starting from a forward fold, coming up into Tadasana, coming back into a forward fold. And again, instead of going into a plank, you're going to bring your hands to the mat, and you can come onto your knees and then into a rocking cat. You can do that a couple times if you want. And then coming back into a down dog. And then so we'll start at the top of our mat again and go through some standing poses. So for example, a warrior one, we want to, maybe typically we're out here. We want to kind of shorten our stance, again in postpartum while we're working on our pelvic floor strength, and just kind of keep it easy on our body for now. Especially if you have had tearing during birth, we want to kind of just shorten everything. And that's true for warrior two as well. Your warrior two might look like this for a little while, and that's perfectly fine. And the same thing goes for things like crescent lunge. If we're in something like this, maybe the alternative for us is to bring your knee down to the mat. And if you do want to practice poses like plank pose, something you can do again is bring both knees to the mat. So kind of like in like a little bit of a push-up position, we're still drawing our belly button in towards the spine, pushing the mat away from you, but we're not overworking those abdominal muscles. And the reason we don't want to do that is because we can permanently disable them from healing properly if they are overworked too soon after delivering a baby. Other poses that require a lot of your core and of your abdominal muscles are poses like boat pose. And that's something that you can work towards. In the meantime, you can use a prop. If you have a ball, a Pilates ball, exercise ball, you can even use a kickball, and just place this behind your back. And without lifting your feet completely off the mat, or maybe using some support from your hands, you can lift one at a time, or just stay like this. Sometimes this is enough too. Or you can really rest and bring your arms forward. So definitely make use of props. The same thing goes for things like wheel pose, which we definitely want to avoid right away because of the stretching of the abdominal muscles. You can use a block or a ball to get into a supported bridge pose instead of a wheel pose. And this is what that looks like. So everyone starts out the same way, obviously, and we are just going to place a prop underneath your tailbone and just hang out like this. You can even place a block between your knees to kind of squeeze, so you get to work those muscles of your inner thigh, pelvic floor, and just hang out here. This is actually a great pose to get into if you're feeling any sort of heaviness from the weight of your organs on your pelvic floor. Super common after giving birth and completely normal. So a great way to alleviate that is even propping your tailbone up or your pelvis up onto a pillow, anything to get that kind of slope. And then if you are unsure about anything during a class, you could either ask the instructor or just pop into a child's pose and meet everyone back in down dog. Thank you so much for joining me. Good luck on your journey, and I hope to see you next time.